well, first of all, 12 isn't round. What do you mean? 15? I'm like, no, I can do this in 10 minutes and 2 minutes for questions, and then I'll take people to the side. And they did not know how to compute that. But I was like, I don't want 30. Let's cut. Right.
Yeah.
I'm like, let's cut it off the end of the day.
Just-
Right. Right. But I knew what I
Everybody
needed.
can
I give
exactly
you
for
that.
18 minutes. It's fine.
I'll give you a
It's fine.
discount.
Correct. So
I'll
I
give you a
pushed back.
discount
So
on time here.
I love what you guys are saying, which is like understanding what you're actually trying to project first, and then only requiring that, because I could talk for 30. Trust me, guys, I could, but I would actually be diluting the thing that I said. It would be getting progressively worse the more we just jammed in there to get to 30. It confuses me that we still do this model most of the time. This episode is brought to you by PT Pintcast Media. If you've ever thought about launching a podcast to grow your brand, your clinic, or your business, we can help. It's about listening deeply, acting with intention, and showing up as your best self when no one's watching. It starts with the quiet moments, when a dad teaches leadership from a fire truck, when a professor challenges with curiosity, not control, and when a team isn't just told what to do, they're trusted to lead. In today's conversation, we go deep on the real mechanics of leadership and how language shapes behavior, how coaching beats mentoring, and why discomfort is the path to growth. Here's what happens when clinicians let go of the highlight reel and get radically honest about what matters. If you've ever questioned your leadership, your voice, or your path, this PT Pintcast episode is for you. All right, so we're talking about leadership, and a lot of times I've only got one guest. Today I've got two, and you guys are both involved at high levels of leadership in pretty complex systems. So here's for both of you, and then you guys get, since you're leaders, you get to figure out which one of you gets to answer first. How's your view of what makes a great leader changed over the years, or I should say, has it changed, and if so, how has it changed? Of what makes someone a good leader?
Oh man. So I'm immediately, I think we're both smiling because this was a conversation I want to say we had 15 years ago, sitting around at the clinic Saturday mornings, jamming out and making people do straight leg raises. And I think the biggest thing that would have changed from then to now, for me at least, is you don't have to have a title to be a leader. All you need is people to follow you. You get that, you are by definition a leader. So good luck. Don't lose sleep over, you're just the rehab guy, the PT doing the exercises. You're still a leader. You just not stuck with the crap that comes with the title.
Yeah, I mean, it's spot on. And I do remember some of those conversations we had a decade plus ago. I think if I were to say what has changed in my thinking, I'll start with what hasn't changed and then move to what has changed. I think what hasn't changed is the idea that Lucas just said as well. You hear sometimes people say things like, you can lead by influence or you can lead by authority. And I actually think true leaders have always led by influence. They may or may not have authority, but true leaders have always led through influence. And I think as Lucas and I have probably evolved, in parallel in our careers, I think the idea of human-centered leadership has really kind of rooted in my mind and my philosophy. And I think that's becoming even more true in the world of AI. And, we can always anticipate the tech world to be advancing things, but I think what hasn't changed, but I think what is becoming more prominent in leadership is leaders who can genuinely and authentically understand and support and appreciate the human experience.
It sounds like a taste of empathy and understanding. Like it's more understanding and reading the other person than it is, I've got the way, follow me.
You got it.
Yeah. Yeah. My dad was a New York City firefighter, and then he got promoted, and then he was a lieutenant. So I remember like asking him like, well, what does that mean? Like the obvious things is he ges to ride in the front seat of the fire truck. So as like a 10 or 11-year-old, I was like, you get the pedal, blows the horn. And he's like, mm-hmm. So I remember the unique part about my dad too was he got promoted at a firehouse. So he was at a firehouse for, 16 years, then got promoted. And then you're like a substitute. You're like a fill-in for a while. Before you get a permanent place, you bounce around the city and you take over people's vacations. And they do that so you can see a lot of different things. It's on purpose. And then you have points based on seniority or whatever. And then you apply for permanent positions, right? Well, my dad had this super rare occurrence where the slot where he was a firefighter came open. But I remember being like, this is great. I grew up in that firehouse and you're going to get it. And he said they usually don't do that. It's hyper rare because if there are guys you were friends with who are firefighters and now you're in charge, they might hesitate to take an order from a buddy, or you might hesitate to give the order because you want to be liked and not, you don't want to be the boss. So they figured out enough guys had left that firehouse that they did say he could go back there, and it like ruffled some feathers, right? And I said, why'd they let you do it? Or, what was the advice for the captain, the guy above you? And he said, he walked into the room for the first time and half the guys knew him and half didn't. And they said something, my dad said something to the effect of, if you make me be the boss, I will be the boss. But if you're here to do your job, I'm here to do our job together. Essentially, he was like, don't take anything. Don't take any liberties you wouldn't take with anybody else. And I'm never going to make you call me Lieutenant anything. And he was there for the rest of his career through 9/11. And that was his sort of approach. So that was a pretty big lesson I learned from my dad on leadership in terms of what a leader really is. Instead of I'm here to tell you what I'm here to lead from the top and point down at you. My dad was like, I'm here to put fires out and everybody's supposed to go home. And I work for you, actually. My responsibility is the other people on the truck. So he looked at it that way. But Lucas, you've got a unique hot take on this, which is mentoring is a crutch. Like, help me understand, like, what does that mean? Why should more leaders lean into coaching instead of mentoring? Like, to me, I would probably use the words interchangeably. Where am I wrong? What are the differences?
Yeah. I have a defiance issue. So perhaps this also is what colors in the picture here on me. But when I think back, all the people who told me what to do, they were pretty much wrong. Go
Huh.
do this and you'll be a leader. Go do that and you'll be a leader. And it just felt like I was like checking off boxes, right? When I finally shifted my approach and coaching became the language that I did that, the emphasis and the focus became on what do I want to do? What do I want to be? And how can I authentically be myself? So instead of taking Jimmy, tell me what I should do. How do I manage this? How do I lead these people? To Lucas is finding his own truth. He's finding how he leads his people his way authentically. That unlocked the whole like secret sauce to feeling like I wasn't an imposter. Like I wasn't trying to fill shoes that just weren't ever going to work. So my mindset entire thing shifted away from I don't want to be your mentor. I don't want to tell you what to do next. I'm not interested in that. My overused line in every role that I've been in where leadership is kind of thrust on you is do not make me manage you. Mentoring is managing you. I don't want to do that. I want to unlock you. I want to point you in the right direction and say, go forth and do awesome things. And I will make sure any barriers in your way are out as long as you're following the parameters that we have to. So to your story's point, right? It's your job to put out the fires. Go put out the freaking fires. Don't make me tell you how to do it, right? Hit it with the wet stuff. I don't know. But like get after it and do the job so that I don't have to be on you. I will focus on the things that make sure you can succeed and do this job well. And so that's where I think mentorship is just one of those it's a buzzword and it's like drinking a diet soda, right? Like it feels really cool at first, but you're still hungry. It doesn't it triggers JJ's laughing. I'm a king of like terrible analogies and
I think
dropping
it's a good one, man.
wonderfulisms.
It's actually
But
more
right,
healthier than the real stuff. So
no, the real stuff at least gives you some calories. Like the diet thing just leaves you looking for the salty snack to add to it. So don't mentor people, coach them, help them find their truth and unlock their best potential, and they're going to pay it back in spades.
JJ, you're nodding along. I'm guessing you agree because you guys are pretty tight.
yeah, sorry, I just got the automatic light out here. Yeah, so my take on that is when I have somebody come to me and ask for mentorship, or in previous teams that I've led, one of my early statements to them is, I'm not interested in helping you solve your problem. I'm interested in helping you solve your next 100 problems or your next 1,000 problems. That inherently takes a different approach, because if I'm just going to solve problems with you one by one, to Lucas's point, really not empowering you. I'm not giving you any thought frameworks or helping you build a system to follow personally to help you navigate, the things that you're going to face ongoing. And, I agree that there is a distinct difference between mentorship and coaching. And I think when you dip into the coaching world, a lot of it really is about empowering and helping somebody. It's almost like the path to self-discovery, where there's a lot of power in that. But, I always start with that like jarring statement when somebody comes to me for mentorship, or they say like, I'm dealing with this issue right now. And I'm like, I'm not interested in helping you solve that problem. Pause, because let that rattle them for a second.
Sure.
And then you swing back in and say, I'm interested in helping you solve your next 100 problems. And that's going to require me to take a different approach with you.
Are you still staying late just to finish your notes? Aphelis Scribe uses ambient AI to auto-generate documentation, so your notes are done before you leave the room. You want to see how it works? Email me now at jimmy@ptpintcast.com. I'll give you a quick demo. You guys brought up technology, and the only constant is going to be change, right? I got news for you. It doesn't matter when you're listening to this in the future. It's going to get faster and more advanced and faster and more advanced and faster and more advanced. But JJ, you've said the future of work will reward people who are uncomfortable in the right ways. So like, I got to understand what are the, I guess, wrong and right ways. Like, help me frame that. And then what do specifically PTs or healthcare providers get wrong about career growth today?
Yeah, there's a lot of directions we could go with this, and I'm really curious to hear what Lucas thinks about this.
Yeah.
But I'll take the stab at it first. The sense of being genuinely uncomfortable for all the right reasons, a lot of it actually forces you to reconsider, beliefs or understanding that you've had about certain aspects, whether be it professionally or even personally. I think I want to put the qualifying statement in here that we all probably have an underlying value system and worldview. And, I'll leave that be for now, but there are aspects that we should be constantly revisiting about what we understand, whether that's like I said, how we're navigating through life, period. Certainly we should be very quick to revisit what we know and believe in the professional sense, because there's just the rate at which knowledge is being created is faster than it's ever been. And, as you said, Jimmy, it will become faster than our brains are biologically capable of actually keeping up with. So like the modern day example of this is people are interested in understanding what's the adoption rate of AI in different venues or personal use. People have to understand that actually is the tool that our brains have been seeking probably for a little bit of time to try to keep up with the rate at which knowledge is being produced. So how do you use it as a tool for good? And I think when you'd mentioned, what have physical therapists or even healthcare professionals, what do they need to consider into the future? I'm interested in actually studying other industries. I think we shouldn't be afraid to study industries that at first glance have no direct correlation to the profession. I think of like, when's the last time as a physical therapist you've looked into what the hospitality industries do differently, or who's leading in that space, or take as a profession, it'd be interesting to understand how might the world of venture capitalism apply in our profession. We shouldn't be afraid to actually look at seemingly unrelated areas or industries and see what pages we might be able to take from that.
Yeah. What can you bring in? Lucas, as you were listening to that, you were nodding a lot. What are your thoughts?
He's cooking. There's like first big. Oh my God, I got to get this out. Stealing from other industries.
Have to.
We are so hesitant. We want to like carve out our own special niche of, we're different, we're unique. No, like you have a patient engagement problem. Hospitality business is amazing.
Yeah.
You have a culture issue. Hospitality. Read the Harvard Business Reviews on Ritz-Carlton and their culture and what they do. You will flip your vision on what it means to take care of people and start to shift how you do it. You're trying to be a solopreneur. You're trying to monetize physical therapy or healthcare, move into cash pay stuff. Go look at venture capitalism. Those people, like, if they don't hunt, they don't eat. this is what we need to be willing to take. The other thing that kept coming to my mind during that was AI and this technology. It's a force multiplier. It doesn't replace our voice. It just makes our voice sharper. It makes it more powerful. And if people don't lean into that, they're missing out on so many opportunities. Like I can take my immediate visceral heart reaction, plug it into an AI tool, and I can start brainstorming and mapping different concepts that go into it. And it shows me things that I never thought of. To JJ's point, my weird primitive brain, it doesn't generate ideas that fast. It doesn't tap into the universe. The old days, it was great. Like patient said something I didn't know, I'd like go hide around the corner and Google it and figure out what's going on. I can hit a AI tool, whatever one you like, you can choose. And I can brain map different ideas. I can connect it to different things I've never thought about. And I can start using my problem solving, which it will never replace, to solve a complex problem. How freaking cool is that we live in that universe?
Yeah, it's wild.
hmm
Force
So,
multiplier is a good phrase there because that's what it feels like. And again, we're gonna look back at this time a year or two from now and be like, I was only using it that way because I
yeah.
still think, even if the technology doesn't progress, how we use it, right? How someone is able to use a hammer will change over time. We'll get smarter that way. Well, let's talk about something that might seem trivial or small, but let's talk about language, Lucas. Like, how does the way we speak to patients, teams, ourselves, right, internal speak, shape the outcomes more than we actually realize? You hear about this a lot, but like, help me understand how it works. How does it do that?
So flashback like circa 2017-ish, CSM, and I'm wandering around, and there's a talk called Words Mean Things. And oh my God, it was my favorite title of a talk ever. I drop that anytime I'm talking about, right? Like words mean things. Like, oh, no, okay, cool. But they do. And as I got further into my coaching journey, there's a gentleman down in Cleveland, Case Western, Richard Boyatzis. And he spends his time sticking people into MRIs and watching what happens in their noodle when they hear words and different things phrased. And what he's come up with is there's two ways that we can approach language and communication. There's a positive emotional attractor and there's a negative emotional attractor. Negative is the stuff that turns on the fight or flight and turns me into just a primitive caveman trying to get out of the conversation, survive, and save face. Freaking worst thing that you can do. Positive is what taps into those cool parts in your brain that makes you think about hope and future and where you can get, to JJ's point, those future 100,000 props. And it is closer to 1,000 that he'll work with because he's still sticking with me. Um, Definitely not 100. I capped that out like 2014. So when we talk to people, my first engagement thinking about this was in the patient realm. They come in for their session. What's the first thing I hit them with? Right? Because I got to do my documentation. So I got my laptop out. What's your pain level? How bad are things? You still can't squat, huh? You still can't do this. And all those phrases are they're tanking
Digging
that
a
down.
hole.
And I
You're digging a hole.
a big ass hole. Sorry, I'm not sure how many curse words I'm allowed. Um, it's all good. It's an adult podcast. Um, so you're digging that hole, and social science research shows it takes between 5 and 9 positive statements to get out for every single one of those
Wow.
negative lines that you drop. So when you look at our entire script in healthcare, we're filled with negative emotional attractors. We're filled with statements that are reminding you what you can't do or what we think you ought to be able to do instead of what your ideal self wants to do. And if you flip that script over and you just talk to somebody about, hey, what's important to you? How are you doing on getting back to playing with your grandkid, on moving towards your goals? That opens up that little part of their brain that gives them hope, that gives them thoughts, that gives them buy in with you and trust you. And next thing you know, your compliance rates is going up, your engagement rates going up. People like being around you, and everybody's watching you in the clinic, thinking like, "Hey, I want some of that. What are they up to?" Then you put that into that chance when somebody is kind enough to bring you the opportunity to lead them, and it's just mind blowing, right? We are conditioned to think your end of year review, right? I tell you all the things you didn't do. I slap you on the wrist. I give you your minimum raise, which is probably behind your cost of living adjustments and inflation rate. And I tell you, go back out there and don't suck next time. Instead of telling you like, these are the things you did great. How do I get you to use that more? How do I get you to leverage that more in your routine work? Because when you do that, you're going to love what you do. You're going to find yourself whistling on that walk in instead of putting your head down and being like, it's work again. Great. Can't wait till it's 5 o'clock. So yeah, I think words mean so many things. And we don't intentionally do it, but we don't understand the power of what we say
How
and
heavy
what
it
it
is.
does to the person listening.
Yeah.
JJ, you?
Words mean things, man. That's one to tuck away. It's simple and obvious, but there's a lot of truth in it. I think, I'll tie this back to one of the points that I made earlier about not being afraid to look at other industries or areas of expertise. And I know immediately this will feel like a stretch, but I want to bring it around. I will not pretend to be anywhere near a hostage negotiation expert, but things that I've learned about language that they do and do not use in hostage negotiation situations, it's all meant to open up lines of communication, safe lines of communication, and things that they try to avoid, simple things that we can, apply into a clinic setting. Things like, rather than using why questions, start with what's and how's. Why questions can be psychologically intrusive and produce what Lucas was saying is a little bit of more of a reactionary response than just a genuine and curious response. So I think those are some of those little things because, Lucas and I are also trained in process and quality improvement methods. And one of the classic root cause analysis methods is what's called 5 whys. So people that get trained in that, they will just drill, a 5 whys sequence on people. But there's an art into when to use that and when not to use that. And I have seen in like classroom settings or residency and fellowship settings where that 5 whys thinking will bleed into mentorship. Hey, start asking your patients the 5 whys to really start to understand that. And I actually think that there's some risk to that because rather than saying why do you think that, some human beings will interpret that question as a little off-putting instead of saying, what, how did you come to that approach or that
It's
thing?
very different.
And there's a genuine curiosity into the latter versions of those questions. And so I think I love that Lucas opened up this line of the conversation because I just met with a leader this week and they were asking how to navigate a specific situation with their team, and coming back to the idea of like, well, I don't want to help you solve this problem, I want to help you solve the next 1,000. Invite the team in a way. And when you get to the end of a conversation with a colleague, a patient, a team, sometimes I'll do kind of a wrap up quick assessment check with somebody. And I said there's two ways you can ask that. It could be, did you enjoy today's conversation, or did this go well? Jimmy, at the end it could be like, Lucas, JJ, did you enjoy your time on the podcast? That's
Right.
You're giving us limited options, and in some ways that forces us to be lazy responders.
Right.
You could say, how did you experience the podcast today? Wide open at that point, and you're forcing us to think. So anytime you can ask a question that genuinely encourages the other person to think,
Yeah.
you're going to get I think you're going to get a more human interaction as well.
I've asked this question before, and I want you to be honest. Like, you don't have to tell me it's. I've said before, if I feel like I've had a conversation with someone, and because I look at people like those mazes, but the circular mazes, right? There's no real straight way to get to a point, right? And that's good because like sort of the fun part is getting into the weeds in those things.
Mm-hmm.
So the question I ask sometimes when I'm like, I feel like there's more there, but I don't know what to ask to get there. I'll ask, is there anything I didn't ask or anything you wanted to talk about, but I didn't open the door for? And that will sometimes they'll stop. And some people would think, well, that's bad because there's a little pause there. And I'm like, I got to be honest. If there's a pause, it tells me the brain's working. And I like when the brain's working and you're not giving me an automatic response. Because especially now, I can go to ChatGPT and just write out a script.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that. Like, so so when people don't understand how to answer a question, I'm okay with rephrasing it. It means I asked a bad question. But if they don't answer it, that's even better for me because it's like they thought about it and they're like, hang on, I don't know what you're getting at here. Help me understand. So I'll ask a lot sometimes when I'm like, I expected this to go differently, or I feel like there's more. Is there anything I didn't ask or didn't let you talk about? And then the key part for me anyway, my career in radio was be quiet and let them answer. Like, let there be a little bit of space. I have no problem with that. Like, what do you guys think about a question like that? Like close to the end, not necessarily the last question you asked, but close to it.
That is diabolically delicious.
I would say I'll spin a challenge on it, and I think this is where I would, Lucas and I probably would approach this in the same way, where if this was a coaching conversation, and I'm just going to spin this up for you, Jimmy, right now, and say, so I heard it as a close-ended question. Is there anything that you would want to talk about? What would be the open-ended and more curious version of that same question? So let's talk through that.
I would go to a what question then.
Yeah.
What topics didn't we get into?
What would you ask if you were me?
Right.
What we didn't ask that I didn't.
Right. What topics maybe that you get excited about that I didn't bring up today? I want to make sure you have a chance to do that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because you write out the easy answer, yes or no. Is there anything that we didn't cover? No, I don't think so. I didn't even actually take any time to think when that question comes up.
Right. That's a good point. So make sure it's open and more what and how questions. Understood. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yep.
Yeah. So
what else should I know? What else do I need to know? What else should we talk about? Right. And if you're really struggling after that silence, there's a magic in making people generate ideas. So tell me 3 things we didn't cover today that maybe in a future conversation we should. Right. So if you do want to put that closed end flavor to it, you have to put more than one option in front of them. The first option is going to be the automatic. No. I guess we could talk about stuff, the weather, the Mets, the Knicks trying to fail, whatever. Like we can talk about that. The second option is going to start getting a little bit deeper. And the third option, they're going to have that pause in that same process you're talking about, right? You're going to see the wheels turning, the smoke coming out of my ears as I'm trying to get the gerbil to run around on the hamster wheel.
Yeah.
Like you're going to get some cool stuff in that third, fourth option. So challenge them to go beyond the first response. That's key. And the other thing I love about that is you open it up with your feeling, right? I feel like there's more here. That's an invitation. That lights me up, right? Because I feel like I'm valued. I feel like I'm bringing you something good instead of being like, so what else?
Right.
No, I'm hearing you and I feel like there's something else that I need to know. What else can you tell me? What else should I take away from this?
Are you still stuck spending hours on administrative tasks? Empower EMR automates scheduling, billing, and documentation so you can actually focus on your patients, not your paperwork. Book a free demo now at empoweremr.com.
It's powerful.
You're talking about earlier, looking towards other industries and professions. Like I've watched enough crime drama to know like how police officers ask questions, like they're all opening the door, right? Or asking the same question 3 different ways. If you're like, nah, you're not telling me there's something there, but if I go accusatory, you're closed forever. I'm never getting that. But if I come back later and I ask a similar question in a different way, I'm trying to come through a different door or window this time. And I'm assuming both of you guys, because you're referencing hostage negotiation, I'm assuming you guys read that Chris Voss book, Never Split the Difference.
Yeah.
No, I did not. I was actually going to ask. So, JJ, did you read Eric Barker? Is that the book you read? Plays Well with Others.
I did not.
I'll have to do that one.
Not.
See, we're getting book
exchanges. I like this.
I picked up Chris Voss's book because it was like, how books go. Like it's the IT book for like 4 weeks or whatever.
Sure.
And it was on the list. And I was like, I wanted to learn how to negotiate like money. Like I was doing like side work and I was like, that always felt weird.
Yeah.
And then if you negotiate poorly, every time you sit down to do that work, you're like, this is worth more, but I didn't want to have that uncomfortable discussion 6 weeks ago, but I'm stuck with it. So I thought it was a book about negotiating, and it is, but it's a book about communication, which is what negotiation is about. And there was one line, and this is funny to me, and maybe you guys could help me understand how I did this. I took a quote from the book. I thought I took a quote from the book, but I think I created the quote while I was reading the book. Because I searched, I was like, this is the quote. This is what Chris Voss said. And then I went back and searched, and I don't think he said it. The quote was, every conversation is a negotiation for information. And I was like, well, there's your subhead for your book, because it's all about hostage negotiating. I went back. I don't think he said it, but I think I listened to him or read him enough that I was like, yes, that is the one takeaway, which is I'm either trying to get you to understand something or I'm trying to understand something. And then I was like, wait a minute. Are there any situations where two humans are conversing digitally or analog that isn't the case? I couldn't come up with any. Even if it's small talk, right? It still is like,
Sure.
I'm trying to
It's an
open
exchange of
lines of
information.
communication, right? I'm trying to earn something. So that was a great book. What was the other one that you said, Lucas? It was Plays Well with Others?
Yep, plays well with others. Eric Parker. He was also a hostage negotiator. So when that came up, I was like, huh, okay. And then a psychology guy who dove in and similar ideas, right? So they talk about the dance of communication and how it works. Hearing that, I kind of had a little bit of a visceral reaction, right? So one of the things I think we get wrong in healthcare is we spend the conversation trying to push information. I'm trying to show you that I know something. I want you to know. And I think we need to invest more of our time in understanding the other person. That's a one of those things that makes people want to talk to you, right? We all have this primitive drive that we want to be understood, that we want to feel seen and heard and felt. And if I'm pushing my truth at you and I'm trying to purvey information constantly, all I'm doing is I'm pushing that sense away from you. And
Yeah.
okay, cool. Like I'm just going to sign off, and Lucas is going to keep preaching from the weird thing that he stands on, so that he's like 6 foot tall when he's in front of people, because
Pulpit.
he's only 5'8" in real life.
Yeah.
To go a little bit meta, this is sort of how this podcast came about 9.75 years ago. Is I was in front of a presenter I was a student physical therapist. I was at a conference and I was understanding this person on stage who was buttoned up and everything was prim and proper and they were using presentation language. And I understood like 30% of it. And I was like, well, I'm obviously lacking in being able to understand. Maybe when I graduate or 10 years from now, I'll be able to understand this. And then I ran into that person in the bar at the networking hour. And I was like, well, let me just talk to this person. And I had a background in radio, but the podcast, again, it was 2005. Like no one was thinking about podcasts, trust me. And I just started asking a few open-ended questions just because I was like, I paid $200. I want to understand one thing, right? Like, because it sounded intriguing. 15 minutes later, I understood the whole 60-minute I understood all the core principles because that person was now having a conversation with me versus a presentation. And I think we can easily slip into presentation mode, even if we're not on stage, even if there's no microphone, even if there's no slides. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, if you catch yourself talking so much, I catch myself doing this a lot in work and personal life. Like if I'm taking multiple breaths before I get to a point, just like I am right now, you're giving a presentation when the goal should be, can we keep this conversation going? Because that's where the real learning, I feel like actually is. It feels like the longer I talk, the more you'll learn from me. I don't think that's true.
Right. Name 10 of your professors from undergrad.
Yeah, I can name.
Oh wait, like we got right. You can only name a handful. Those were the ones that made you feel something. They spit information at you, and based on the topics of the conversation and the years we're referencing, this was a time when you didn't have PowerPoint lectures and recorded stuff, right? They preached at you from the front of the classroom. Maybe they drew on the whiteboard, or if you were in a bougie school, you had a dry erase marker, like right. So they shot information, and you don't remember a thing. You don't remember a one of them. The people that made you feel valued, the people that shared information and partook really in what that academic mission is, they're the ones that come to your mind. They're the ones that you think of as like, oh yeah, those are the people that shaped me.
Yeah.
There's 2 or 3 of them.
Yep. Mm-hmm. It's funny you mentioned that because when I did the switch from just doing audio, because our podcasts used to look like this, like there was no video to it, I got real nervous. I was like, everything needs to be clean. I need to edit every little imperfection out and everything needs to be slick. And then my buddy who's a video guy was like, no, I just want to put what you do on a video. I just think it's a good way to do it. And this was before sort of short form flippy reels and shorts and all that. He was from outside of the profession, more of a videographer. He's like, no, I like impurities and imperfections. He's like, again, and now to AI, I could generate a perfect image right now, but it's not, if there's no feeling there, it's not good at all. So it's like, you're right. Well, who said that? Maya Angelou, right? People won't remember what you said or maybe what you made me feel. And I'm thinking back now to undergrad. And I'm like, man, we paid that much money. I'm like, I got like a dozen moments in 4 years. Like, damn, like that sucks. But when you get that, it's really, it in the moment. There's that thing. Maybe that's why TED Talks are so powerful. Like they practice those things for like a year. and they strip it down to what only needs to be there.
Yep.
That's why they're so powerful.
There's nothing harder than trying to talk for 10 minutes and get your point across. Shorter the time, the worse the presentation feels to you. Give me an hour and I can just fill that space.
Yeah. But then you'll do that. You'll fill it instead of saying, this is interesting because you mentioned going to CSM, and I look at you want to talk about like looking at other industries to take something. So Lucas, JJ's got some audio issues. We'll bring him back in a minute. But Lucas, if you were going to come to me, if you worked at the radio station I worked at, and let's say I hosted the morning show, and you were like an upstart broadcaster, you wanted to get some FaceTime on the morning show. Ironically, I say FaceTime on radio, but you get it. You would come to the morning show host and you would say, hey, Jimmy, I got this bit. It's about AI and whatever. We're going to do it tomorrow. And I'd listen. And this is informal. It's in the hallway. I'd be listening, saying, okay. Yeah, I'll give you 3 minutes tomorrow. And you're like, but it's 10. And I'm like, it's 3. It's a 3-minute bit, right? So now you've got to like, oh man, how do I get this thing that I thought 5 seconds ago was 10 minutes long? I've got to jam it into 3. I make you push and you get better. You lose 7 minutes of stuff that probably didn't need to be there. So flip that. You mentioned CSM. I found it so interesting that when people applied to give presentations at conferences, they said, this is a 90-minute presentation and it was yay or nay. Instead of, here is the outcome of what people will learn and feel. What do you think that's worth? How much? Number one, we never ask the presenter how much time. It's usually like you fall into one of these 2 or 3 slots. So the funny part is I'll go to conferences and it confuses people. Like I'm talking at the New York APTA New York event this weekend. And they're like, well, we can give you 30 minutes. I'm like, oh, I need 12. And they're like, well, first of all, 12 isn't round. What do you mean? 15? 30? I'm like, no, I can do this in 10 minutes and 2 minutes for questions. And then I'll take people to the side. And they did not know how to compute that. But I was like, I don't want 30. Let's cut. Right. I'm like, let's cut it off the end of the day. Right. Right. But I knew
everybody I give you for 18 minutes. It's fine. It's fine.
Correct. So
I'll give you a discount on time.
I love what you guys are saying, which is like understanding what you're actually trying to project first and then only requiring that, because I could talk for 30. Trust me, guys, I could, but I would actually be diluting the thing that I said. It would be getting progressively worse the more we just jammed in there to get to 30. It confuses me that we still do this model most of the time.
All right, so let's just make sure that JJ's email address is the only one posted and associated with this. I think the 90-minute sessions are the worst idea we have.
90.
Terrible. Let's raise your hands in the audience because we can't see you. Back to jokes about this. Like, raise your hand if you scan your badge, you sit for 10 to 15 minutes, and then you walk out. If it does not catch your passion, your interest, you're done. You're done. 15 minutes. So
immediately. Yeah, your first like. I say 5 minutes, but it's probably more like 2 minutes. Anytime I get, 60 minutes with an audience, which at work as part of my role, I'll facilitate things monthly with, 50 plus individuals. And my objective within the first 2 minutes is the audience as active participants almost immediately. They're either talking to each other. And then, I kind of have a rule that if it's beyond 30 minutes, I'll share even Steven with the audience. I'll speak for 15 minutes, but the audience is speaking for 15 minutes. I'll speak for 45 minutes, but the audience is going to interact for 45 minutes.
The only
that's just there's no I don't know if there's science to that. I don't have anything to back that up, but I have found the more that I stick to that even
anecdotally, my learner satisfaction is highest.
It actually goes way better.
Now, whether that says to you should probably just cut the podcast now or what we're at, that's a whole other conversation. But no, people, the day and the era of me shouting at you and I am the source of truth, that's gone, right? Read the fallacies of feedback, that HBR article. It's great. It punches into feedback I'm not the source of truth. I'm not this all-knowing, omnipotent thing who can preach to you. It's the audience when they start brewing and they come up with that individual recipe.
Yep.
That's where the good stuff happens. So yeah, even Steven is a great split. Give them their time to talk. Give them a thought, and don't distill your message. Right? Like you have 2 things. One thing you want them to walk away from.
Yeah.
Everything else is just noise.
Yep. Everything else is filler. All killer, no filler. Right? That's some 41. The cool thing about podcasting though is you can pause it and come back. So there was a great line. I'm good at quotes, but bad at who said them. Somebody said, people understand what you just said when you're not talking. So I pictured it as feeding a baby. It's like I could just continue to shovel food in a kid's mouth. They're going to choke. So I've got to figure out how much food is good enough, right? Enough, not too little, not too much, and then wait. So it's funny when you hear like people like Obama. Obama was always like, was sort of like skewed on Saturday Night Live. They would mock his tone. But if you look at it, he would pause. He would have these big pauses. And they would always sort of like mock him like, well, he's trying to sound prolific. And I'm like, I look at it, I was like, no, he's trying to make sure they catch up. Because what he just gave them might have been dense. So they need to chew a little bit, then swallow, and then they're ready for the next bite. You don't need to teach babies to do that. Babies are like, okay, I got it. And then they look up like, all right, you can shovel some more in here. People are the same way, in my opinion anyway, or similar in ingesting information. Because if you just hit them with a fire hose, they're just going to sit there with the first mouthful and then just be wet. And they're going to go, okay, cool. That was a hot 90 minutes. And what I learned, nothing. None of it got in. It's all over me. I got nothing.
Yeah, I think the simplest way to boil this down is, how do you take, you'd use the phrase the exchange of information, or every conversation is a negotiation for information. It's like, how do you transform an exchange of information into an experience? That's the question you should answer. So, when I work with leaders or others that are forming a presentation or about to deliver
I've asked a similar question.
Conversation.
Great question.
It's, what do you want that person or the audience to feel?
And then you can
start there, because then you're going to reverse engineer the experience.
If you would coach this, if you had someone that you knew had the phrase is 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag, like you're like, this is too much. You could say,
it sounds like you're talking about my shirt. What's happening?
Well, yeah.
You turn my video off?
Yeah. You could say, hey, listen, this is too much. I'm going to scold you, cut half this, and talk to me in an hour. Or you could say, what would you say? Like, with this amount of information, do you think they'll actually get that? Is this the right amount of information to reach that emotion? Is it too much? Is it not enough? Like, you want to coach them to make that their discovery, right?
So first thought came to mind, like, one, I would ask, do you want some feedback? Are you open to some feedback about what I just heard?
Big one, yeah.
Get invited in first, because you poured your heart and your soul into that 10 gallons of shit you just passed on to me. And you may not be ready to hear for me to tell you, by the way, I took nothing away from it. You are way too dense. So get that invite into the world if you can. Then if I know you, I'm just going to tell you, like, an honest label is not a bad thing. If I don't know you, I'm going to soften it a little bit. I'm going to talk to you about, like, so these are the things that I walked away from. What was the message you were trying to get across? Did that land? This is what I felt, right? So talk about my truth, because you can't argue with me about what I felt or what I took away.
Right.
That's mine. That's mine. You can only reflect on, oh shit, Lucas didn't hear a thing I said about experience. Like, how many rungs the ladder should have. All he heard was, like, we talked about ladders, and he was busy processing how much I was nodding and everybody else's looks and what was happening in the room. And he was hot and his knees were sweaty, and he's trying to hear the words, and then he's trying to figure out what, like, the words actually meant. You got nothing. That's a powerful reflection point, as opposed to me telling you just right out of the gates, thanks for that 30-minute sermon. Right. You sucked.
Right. Like, instead of saying, hey, that's too much. Like, I feel like there's a lot you want to communicate. How do you, based on what you've given to me or other people, like, do you think that's could it be too much, too fast, too soon?
Yeah. Yeah. It makes me, this conversation is making me think.
Guy, just throwing that out there.
Adam Grant's one of my favorite authors, thought leaders, organizational psychologists, like, really witty thinker. Yeah. He said, his big thing is we should actually ditch feedback.
Yep.
We should stop asking for feedback, because it actually immediately turns somebody into a critic, whether they know it or not. Jimmy, could you give me feedback on how the podcast went? Right. And you're immediately going to say, okay, I'm looking back and I'm going to critique, or I'm going to be soft about it and, not hurt your feelings. Instead, we should ask for advice. Hey, Jimmy, what advice might you have for future podcasts? Like, if I was a 6 out of 10 guest, what would it take for me to become an 8? And you're going to coach me forward now. And so when you said, how would you approach somebody that just dumped a lot and then they're like, hey, what do you think? I love Lucas's invitation. If they haven't approached you about it, and it's, rather you're like, I want to help this person. Hey, how open are you to, talking about your material before you go deliver it, and, get them to process through that. But it's, I might say, to make that a 10 out of 10, I'm going to challenge you to consider how you might do half of the content and preserve the impact that
That's
you want to
very,
make.
it's
Think about
strategic,
that.
but not
Yeah. How
tactical.
would
It
you
makes them go
half the
back to the
content
drawing
but
board, or at
preserve
least
the
look
impact?
at
What
what
might
they've
you
got
do?
now and say, okay, most of the time, in my experience anyway, it's removing rather than adding. Most of the time, it doesn't need anything. But for some reason, and someone pointed this out recently, we rush to
Yeah.
add instead of subtract. When the real, like,
Yeah.
look at the iPhone. Like, they could have had things sticking out. Like, the goal was like, what is absolutely needs to be there and nothing else. In fact, let's make the thing that's this big half as big next iteration. Let's remove. And then we're confused why it looks so and feels so clean.
Yeah.
It's like, because it is. Because that was probably the goal. Because Jobs probably said, I want it to be functional, all those things, but it needs to feel like I've got
Yeah.
power in my hand, right? And you don't feel that when you pick up other things, but you
Got it.
do here. And that can be done not just with, consumer products or computers. It could be done with TED Talks, right? If you were to compare two different things, a TED Talk is
Yeah.
like an iPhone. The goal is strip everything away, so only what needs to be there is there. So for every second that you're listening, it's impactful.
It's
And
the
that's
least intuitive principle ever, right? It's addition by subtraction.
correct.
Just do it. Just take some stuff out.
Yeah.
Unpack the suitcase a little bit. You don't need to be like standing on top of it to zip it shut. It's going to be okay.
All right.
Yeah, it makes me. So I'm a personal finance nerd. I wouldn't say I'm an expert on it, but I like thinking about these things. And I always think about, like, how do you maximize the use of a resource like money? So, like, how do you maximize the return on investment? Those types of things. And when it comes to making an impact on people, if you're a leader, if you're a clinician, if you're a professor, if you're a podcast host, how do you maximize the impact per word? What would it take to maximize your impact per word spoken? And that's going to force you to think about questions that you ask, the space that you leave for the person's experience. So it's like, how do you drive up impact and
Yeah,
reduce
I
words
mean,
at the
not to
same
say like, of
time?
course I did
You're
that, but
going
there
to
was a couple
actually
times in the
enhance
last
your
9.5
impact
years. I
per
mean, again, this
word.
is like a weird side project I do, but there were a couple times that I was just like, I'm done. Like, this isn't fun anymore. And people pushed back on me, former professors who are still coaching me and not mentoring me. But they were just like, well, why isn't it fun? And I'm like, because it's not. And they're like, great, why? And I'm like, I don't know. And, and then finally I popped out.
Third one.
Right. Finally, it popped out. I was like, I think I'm doing interviews on
They hit
topics
you
I
with the
think
5 whys. They hit
other
you with
people
the
think I should be and not the ones I want. And they were like, okay, what do you think would happen if you stopped doing that? I'm like, I think I'd look forward to when I see an interview with Lucas and JJ on my schedule and not like, well, I've got to knock this out because I've got to hit these 10 buckets
My
every
quota.
my quota. Exactly. And I was real close to shutting it down 2 years ago because I was doing that. I flipped to YouTube and then I started watching YouTubers and being like, oh, I need to do these things. And then I realized I'm not a YouTuber. The stuff is on YouTube. We're recording video right now, but like, this is very much not that. It's not slick. It's not clean, right? We're doing this kind of in one take. We're not going to dump out the F-bombs, right? And that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
They happen.
But
happen.
I had to do that a few times with myself, and that was really simple but not easy, was figure out like, all right, well, then remove that. Then do 3 episodes less a month, but the ones that remain, you'll be super pumped about.
Yeah.
And whatever you're pumped about, likely the people that listen to you will also feel that from you. Yeah. But I still have the highlight reel mentality as well. As much as I might talk about it and warn others about it, I
They'll
still fall
notice.
prey
Yeah.
to it and just go like, everything's got to look great. And I'm like, newsflash, it's not. It's not all great. It's not easy. It's not simple. So that's why they're those biases are there, whether we know them or not. Even if we know them, they are still, and which is mind blowing, which is very weird to understand.
Mm-hmm.
And how much more open is your brain, right? Instead of thinking
doubt.
about that ought self.
No doubt.
Oh man, that wasn't polished enough. I need to tighten up my collar. I should wear a tie. I didn't use the proper words. I made a weird analogy.
Right.
Your mind is so full of crap that you lose the fun stuff. You lose the room on your plate for good when you let that go and you live where you are and focus on, in this case, your ideal self. What makes you happy about doing this podcast? Get back to that. Stop the other crap. Stop being off self. Just do what you want to do. It's gonna work out. That's powerful. And
Yeah.
suddenly you're happy again. Happy people don't kill people. Thank you, Legally Blonde. Let's go.
Mhm.
Like, here's the polished version. Here you go. So back to the
see,
hot self.
my version of that, Lucas, is I'll ask, and this was a question I started asking myself. Yeah, for sure. That my version of that, and it started with finding a way to get myself out of, Jimmy, sort of what you described, through your own experience, but I would start to ask myself, what percentage of my job would I do for free right now? It's not meant to be a public conversation. You don't have that with your boss. Whatever. You're not, like, the intent is not to go intentionally take a pay cut on things. But if you could privately be honest with yourself, what percentage of your job would you do for free right now? And then once you actually come up with the honest answer to that, what would it take to drive that percentage up? Because to your point, it probably looks like subtracting some things.
I just had one more meeting in my day. I swear to God, I would come here for free.
By subtracting, you're creating space.
Just one more meeting
for the stuff.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right. Well, I think we should have you guys. I think we should have you guys back, like Harvard Business Review. Like, we'll come. You guys will come in quarterly. And just give us your leader. We'll say, like, how like the Daily Show or TV News, they'll have like our political correspondent or whatever. You guys will be our leadership correspondents, and just say every 3 months, whatever happened since the last conversation. Hey, I've been thinking about, or this is something I didn't think, or
I love that.
I mean, you bring up Adam Grant. How many authors will write a book and then follow up that book, essentially saying how everything they wrote in the first book, they've actually changed their mind on, or a decent amount of it? Yes. Right.
Isn't capitalism amazing?
Yeah.
What's that? Say again?
Adam Grant.
Isn't capitalism amazing? Writes one book, you buy it, you get excited, and then you write another book. Nope. This is the right answer now.
Disagree. It's a great way to go from
put it on the calendar. Yep.
Throw it all out. Think again.
Yeah. Book it. Next quarter, it's like, hey,
we learned how to not make a light bulb.
3 months ago, it's like,
and that's what you got to do sometimes. You just got to learn how not.
Like,
to
things have changed. Things.
All right. Last thing we do on the show is called the parting shot. If you were to leave the audience with one thought from today, what would it be? This is me asking you to pick out something that you were like, yeah, if I'm going to make sure you take one thing away, because one thing's a lot, actually, from 53 minutes of talking. One thing's a lot. What would it be?
Awkward pauses. Who goes first?
I would.
You just like throwing me through the doorway first.
I'll give you the honor of closing it out.
You just like throwing me through the doorway last, right? Like, let's drop the party guy in here.
I think I would. What's that? Yeah. I'll hold the door for you. On this podcast. I think I would ask the question for everybody to consider: when is the last time that you genuinely felt uncomfortable professionally? And what's one thing that you could do in the next week or month that would genuinely push you
otherwise there's no change,
to a sense of discomfort? So I would leave it at that, because I do think that we just have to we have to start self-applying challenge and a little bit of that intentional stoking. I think that's really important, no matter what phase in your life journey or your career that you're in.
And I would just
have to find.
I wrote out a few thoughts, right? Because I was trying to plot this out. Back to JJ's point, right? What do I want people to walk away from this with? That was my first thought when I even signed up for it. And I'm going to leave you with the idea that you are far more happy, you are far more open when you ditch the ought self. When you stop thinking about what you ought to do, what you ought to have, how you ought to say it, and you just focus on yourself. What's your next truth? What is that? And you will find happiness in places you never thought existed when you let go of all that other stuff and let your plate fill up with things that make you happy, things that are you, ideally.
Love it. Well, thanks, guys. This was great. I learned a lot. It made me think. It's going to make me continue to think, which is probably the sign of a good conversation. And
thanks, Jimmy.
Yeah, and
the Batch Brothers.
That was what I was hoping you would feel with Lucas and me being.
Yeah, I mean, completely honest. Look, I started this podcast. Somebody gave me credit. They gave me like a compliment.
I want people feeling
like, "Wow, you're a PT student, and you stepped out of your comfort zone and started a podcast." And I was like, "Thank you. I can't take that, because what I did was I was like, you do know I was in radio for 15 years. This is my comfort zone." So I almost like treated it like a hamster ball. I was like, I'm uncomfortable everywhere else. I'm comfortable with this. So I sort of used interview history and said, all right, I'm going to bumble around PT now and I'm going to figure it out. Now, the nice part was, and I think the show was successful at first once because there were like only 2 other podcasts in 2005. There just weren't any, or 15, sorry. And I think the other reason was other people, and this is not a knock, but I notice it when other people start podcasts, they can't wait to show you how smart they are. And that's great. I mean, but I think the really good ones, like Adam Grant, is like, hey, I learned something. What do you guys think? Like, and let's play around with this thing I just learned. Not I'm here to pontificate. And my show is almost like salmon swimming upstream. I was like, I can't wait to show you how dumb I am. But in 20 minutes or 58 minutes, we're going to learn some stuff. And maybe we'll be 0.5% smarter. Let's go do that in a real honest way and come along for the ride. I think that's why it's been successful. So I have to uncoach that from people sometimes too. They're like, I need to be the expert. And I go, people don't relate with those people. Like, I'm not saying you're not smart. You are smart, or you wouldn't host a podcast on this topic, but being that forever student is more approachable, and people, I don't know, I learn more. So this whole show is personal growth for me that I get to bring people along with, and that's fun for me. So it's like my life on mic, right? So it's sort of like, it's stupidly simple, but it seems to work. Yeah. Well, all right. 3 months from now, we're recording at the end of May in 2025. May, June, July. Let's do it at the end of summer. We'll say end of August. We'll lock in a time, and then whatever we discuss, whatever you've learned, or I like this, I dislike this, change my mind. We'll come back, but we'll put it in the box of leadership. But it doesn't have to stay there if we do that.
Onward,
gentlemen. Thank you. This is a good way to start the day, man.
That and the coffee got it going. Yeah, little cold brew action. We're good to go.
Yeah, likewise.
Like what you heard? Great. Subscribe to the show on Apple or Spotify. You can watch the episodes on YouTube. Or don't. I'm not your boss. You want to specialize in ortho, neuro, or sports physical therapy and actually get paid while doing it? Brooks IHL offers accredited residencies and fellowships with full salary, full benefits, and real mentorship from clinical experts. Learn more and apply at brooksihl.org. There aren't nearly enough podcasts in this world. Said no one. Why not launch one more? If you thought about launching a show but don't quite know how, we can help you do all that back-end stuff. Email me at jimmy@ptpintcast.com, and we can add one more podcast no one else will listen to the pile.